Exactly 2 weeks after the yacht celebration, just when life had finally started feeling peaceful again, my lawyer called. And the moment Cassandra White's name flashed across my screen, I already knew tranquility was about to pack its bags and leave the building. I stared at the phone for a second before answering. "Marcus," Cassandra said carefully, "Sabrina is suing you." I leaned back slowly in my chair. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because at that point, it honestly felt inevitable. Of course she was suing me. Of course the woman who cheated on me, drained the visible accounts dry, got me pushed out of my own company, took my car, forced me out of my own rented home, married my former boss, publicly insulted my parents on a yacht, and then watched me remarry her former best friend under fireworks and champagne, somehow still believed she deserved more. The level of audacity almost deserved academic study. I rubbed my forehead and asked the only question that actually mattered. "For what?" Cassandra exhaled heavily. "She's claiming entitlement to half your assets, specifically the assets she believes you concealed before and during the marriage." There it was. The real reason behind the performance. Sabrina had finally connected the dots. Or at least enough of them to become dangerous. She had realized I was never truly broke. The life savings she burned through during the marriage. That had only been the visible layer. A carefully controlled financial identity. The marital version of Marcus Hale. And now, after seeing me rebuild publicly, reclaim my position, and gift my wife a yacht large enough to trigger media attention. Her ego simply couldn't process it. Because suddenly the math no longer added up. A financially ruined man was not supposed to recover that fast. He definitely wasn't supposed to recover richer. And he absolutely was not supposed to look happier afterward. That was the part Sabrina couldn't accept. Not the monies. The happiness. The peace. The proof that leaving her had not destroyed me permanently. She wasn't heartbroken. She was offended. Offended that the future she thought she abandoned had turned out far larger than she originally calculated. Offended that she had stepped off the train too early. And now, she wanted back on board. Apparently watching me succeed beside Alina had become emotionally intolerable. According to the lawsuit, Sabrina claimed she had been a supportive and contributing spouse who helped me establish my financial foundation and was therefore entitled to half of everything connected to my wealth, including the assets protected through my father's company long before our marriage even existed. Supportive. That word nearly caused cardiac arrest from laughter alone. This woman had treated marriage like a luxury subscription service. Like love was some kind of investment portfolio where affection was deposited only when returns looked promising. She didn't support me. She consumed me. Emotionally, financially, mentally. And now she wanted the court to believe she had been my silent business partner all along. The revisionist history was honestly impressive. I thanked Cassandra, ended the call, and immediately contacted the one man who had warned me from the very beginning. My uncle. The same uncle who told me not to reclaim my assets immediately after the divorce. The same uncle who practically predicted Sabrina's personality before I was willing to see it myself. When he answered, I explained everything. The lawsuit. The accusations. The claims. Then silence followed for a few seconds. Not worried silence. Thinking silence. And finally, he replied calmly. Good. I blinked once. Good. Let her sue. That was it. No panic. No emergency meetings. No stress. No concern. Just absolute confidence. Because unlike Sabrina, my family didn't move emotionally. They moved strategically. Everything had been done legally. Carefully. Documented years in advance. The asset transfers existed long before the marriage. Tax filings. Corporate structures. Legal witnesses. Compliance trails. Paperwork so clean it could survive a government audit and still ask for a polish afterward. Nothing had been illegally hidden. And that distinction mattered more than Sabrina realized. Because there's a massive difference between hiding assets and protecting them. One is fraud. The other is intelligence. And Sabrina was about to learn that difference the expensive way. The funny part. If she had simply walked away and lived her new life quietly, she would have remained financially comfortable forever. But greed has a strange effect on people. It convinces them that losing access to something is the same thing as being robbed of it. And Sabrina genuinely believed my wealth should have belonged to her. Not because she earned it. Not because she built it. But because she once stood beside the man who did. The problem was, standing beside a kingdom does not automatically make you its ruler. Especially when you burned the bridge on your way out. Still, lawsuits are exhausting, even when you already know you'll win. Because the real weight of them isn't in the outcome, it's in everything they force back into your life while you wait for that outcome to arrive. Depositions that feel less like legal procedure and more like someone combing through your memory with gloves on. Financial disclosures that turn years of private life into public evidence boards. Old messages resurfacing, stripped of tone, stripped of intent, reassembled into something that looks guilty if you stare at it long enough. And worst of all, old memories you had already made peace with refusing to stay buried. Every conversation, every compromise, every moment you once decided not to question too deeply, it all comes back up like it was waiting for permission. And through all of it, Elena stayed present. Not as background comfort, not as passive support, but as a quiet, stabilizing force that slowly stopped feeling like company and started feeling like structure. She didn't dramatize the situation. She didn't compete with it. She didn't make emotional demands in the middle of chaos. She simply adapted around it. Some mornings I'd wake up and she was already at the dining table with her laptop open, coffee beside her, moving through her own work while somehow remaining fully aware of everything happening in mine. And when the case started expanding, she didn't hesitate to step closer to it. At first it was small things. Organizing documents without being asked. Spotting inconsistencies I had skimmed past. Quietly cross-referencing dates in filings while Cassandra and I reviewed disclosures. Then it became something sharper. One afternoon, she tapped a section of a financial statement and said calmly, "This doesn't align with their earlier disclosure. Either this is an error or something is being hidden." That was the moment the case stopped feeling like noise and started feeling like structure. Because she wasn't guessing. She was seeing patterns. And the unsettling part was realizing she sometimes saw them faster than I did. In all of that chaos, Elena became the most extraordinary part of my life. Not because she fought loudly. Not because she inserted herself into the conflict. Not because she tried to win against Sabrina. But because she didn't move. At all. While everyone else spiraled emotionally, strategically, legally, financially. Elena became the pillar I didn't realize I desperately needed. Steady, grounded, present. She didn't interrogate me every 5 minutes about the lawsuit. She didn't panic over accusations, rumors, or the ugliness of everything surfacing publicly. By then, she understood the full scope of my life. The complicated financial structures. The generational wealth systems. The portions of my assets still shielded inside my father's corporate framework. The fact that even during our own marriage, there were layers of wealth I had intentionally kept compartmentalized, not out of distrust toward her, but because families like mine survived through caution, not emotion. And yet, she wasn't bothered. Not even slightly. Because unlike Sabrina, Elena never measured love through access. If anything, she became more practical than emotional about it. One evening, while Cassandra was reviewing strategies to reinforce asset protections against Sabrina's claims, Alina casually began sharing defensive frameworks she had once used to protect her own company during hostile business disputes. At first, Cassandra listened politely. Then she stopped writing. Then she slowly looked up. "Wait," she said, leaning forward. "Repeat that." Elena did. And I watched something almost frightening happen in real time. Cassandra lit up. Not emotionally, professionally. Like a battlefield tactician discovering a new formation that changed the entire war. The strategy was elegant, legal, aggressive in the cleanest possible way. By the end of the meeting, Cassandra was pacing around her office talking to herself while expanding Alina's framework into other unrelated cases she was handling. "I love her," Cassandra announced at one point, completely serious. "Do you understand how beautiful this is legally?" Alina just blinked in confusion while sipping tea. Meanwhile, I sat there realizing something almost surreal. My wife was actively helping me secure structures that technically kept her from having unrestricted access to certain assets. And she genuinely did not care. That part shook me more than anything else. Because one night, after admitting I felt conflicted about still keeping significant holdings tied into my father's company structure, she looked at me like I had fundamentally misunderstood something simple. "I'm entitled to your heart and your sincerity, Marcus," she said calmly. "As long as you love me and treat me right, I already have everything I need." Simple sentence. Absolutely devastating effect. Because suddenly, every memory of Sabrina felt loud in retrospect. Every argument about status. Every obsession with appearances. Every subtle comparison disguised as concern. And then there was Alina. A woman sitting in oversized pajamas beside my attorney, helping defend assets she wasn't even interested in claiming. I fell in love with that woman all over again. Not metaphorically. Literally. It felt like rediscovering her, without old emotional static clouding my vision. And somehow, she reflected it back. We became even closer than we already were, which honestly shouldn't have been possible considering how inseparable we had already become. The intimacy shifted. Not just physically, emotionally. Less hesitation. Less invisible distance. It felt like the chaos outside had accidentally burned away every remaining layer of caution inside our marriage. Meanwhile, Sabrina was unraveling in a different direction entirely. Not quietly, not internally. Loudly through narrative, through projection, through carefully shaped conversations with mutual friends that reframed her position at every opportunity. She wasn't just defending herself, she was rebuilding reality. I had manipulated her. I had deceived her financially. I had engineered a long con designed to entrap her in a life she now claimed she never agreed to. I had pumped a lot of money into my homewrecker wife's business, while I never did anything remotely close for her when we were together. Honestly, I was even surprised she found out I had donated to Alina's company, which was actually repayment for her giving me her life savings on our anniversary. Granted, I returned it with tenfold interest, but that part didn't really matter. Alina was my wife. Her affair with Richard. A conveniently minimized detail in her rewritten timeline, a side effect, a misunderstanding, something irrelevant compared to the bigger injustice she now centered her identity around. Funny thing about revisionist storytelling, it always requires forgetting who else was in the room. But what truly fractured Sabrina? What visibly distorted something inside her every time she thought about it? Was Richard. Because Richard wasn't who she had married in her imagination. He wasn't the peak. He wasn't the upgrade. He wasn't the escape from my world she had convinced herself he represented. In reality, he was still deeply tied to the exact same ecosystem she thought she had escaped. My father's company. The realization didn't land in her like ordinary disappointment. It glitched something in her. Because she had mentally framed herself as a woman who had moved upward, only to realize she was still orbiting the same structure. Just indirectly. And worse, she wasn't even orbiting it independently. She was relying on a man who was professionally dependent on my father's company to survive. Meaning whether she liked it or not, her new life still sat disturbingly close to my family's influence. Even if I had zero intention of revenge. Even if I never abused that reality. She couldn't psychologically tolerate it. In her mind, it became humiliating. Taboo. The fact that her husband worked inside a system connected to my family poisoned her pride in ways she couldn't regulate. And Richard suffered for it. Because suddenly his accomplishments no longer looked impressive to her. Apparently the disgusting crime he committed was becoming high-ranking staff at a prestigious company without actually owning the company itself. The irony was almost painful. The same ambition she once admired in him became evidence of weakness once she realized he wasn't independently powerful. Arguments became constant. Smaller things became personal. His job transformed from status symbol into humiliation trigger. And beneath all of it was a truth Sabrina couldn't hide anymore. She hated that reality kept pulling her back toward my proximity. Then she made the mistake that changed everything. She sued. And in doing so, she woke something that had intentionally stayed asleep. My father. He had remained quiet throughout the entire ordeal. Observing. Measuring. Allowing things to unfold without interference. But Sabrina mistook silence for harmlessness. She thought no reaction meant no consequences. She was catastrophically wrong. The moment the lawsuit escalated, my father moved. Not emotionally. Not publicly. Structurally. Quietly, internal processes began shifting inside the company Richard worked for. Audits that had never existed suddenly did. Financial irregularities that had gone unexamined were now being reviewed line by line. Entire accounting systems were opened and cross-checked. And Richard, without fully realizing it yet, became the center of a forensic investigation that expanded faster than anyone expected. Embezzlement flags. Fraud indicators. Ghost names buried in payroll structures. Financial movements hidden behind layers most employees never even knew existed. And it was bad. Not corporate scandal bad. Prison bad. The kind of bad that doesn't end with termination papers. The kind that ends with indictments. My father never announced anything publicly. He didn't need to. He simply authorized the investigation and allowed the system to function without interference. And suddenly, what had started as a messy personal lawsuit was no longer personal. It was structural. Richard, for the first time in his life, was standing inside consequences he couldn't negotiate his way out of. And somehow, right in the middle of all that pressure, Elena went rogue. Completely rogue. Out of nowhere, she became aggressively active on social media. Dinner dates. Beach visits, late-night coffee photos, pictures of our intertwined hands, videos of me kissing her forehead, candids of us laughing, tiny domestic moments that looked almost offensively peaceful considering the legal war happening in the background. At first, I didn't understand it. I thought maybe she was simply reclaiming normalcy. But no, Elena was making a statement. A deliberate one. She wasn't telling the world we were happy. She was telling the world we were inseparable. Every post carried the same silent message. You failed to break this man, and now you never will. And apparently, it worked. Because Sabrina started disintegrating. Not publicly at first. Privately. Emotionally. Then digitally. Fake accounts began appearing. Anonymous messages. Death threats. Homewrecker. Snatcher. Die by a train, you B-word. Dozens of increasingly unstable messages sent at random hours from burner accounts pretending not to be her. And Alina ignored every single one. Completely. She never argued back. Never posted passive-aggressive captions. Never acknowledged Sabrina publicly even once. She simply continued posting our life. Another dinner. Another vacation. Another kiss. Another peaceful morning. And somehow that silence pushed Sabrina even deeper into instability. Honestly, I didn't fully understand female psychological warfare. But Alina apparently did. Because she moved through the entire thing with terrifying precision while pretending she wasn't moving at all. And strangely enough, Cassandra approved. No, approved was too small a word. She was delighted. Because every fake account, every threat, every unhinged outburst became more evidence. More documentation. More proof of harassment, obsession, emotional instability, and targeted misconduct. At one point, Cassandra actually laughed while reviewing another batch of screenshots. "She's building my case for me," she said. "I almost feel insulted by how easy she's making this." Meanwhile, Alina sat beside me casually scrolling through vacation locations like none of it mattered. And maybe that was the final thing that broke Sabrina completely. Not revenge. Not anger. Not humiliation. Irrelevance. Alina replaced chaos with peace so naturally that Sabrina stopped looking like a rival. She looked like a ghost clawing at windows of a life she no longer had access to. Section 3. The courtroom collapse. The court date finally arrived. And honestly, I wasn't nervous. That phase had passed weeks earlier. By then, I wasn't operating on fear anymore. I was operating on exhaustion. The kind that settles deep into your bones after months of defending your peace from someone determined to keep invading it long after losing access to your life. By the time we arrived at the courthouse, I didn't feel anxious. I felt done. Done explaining. Done revisiting history. Done watching Sabrina reshape reality every time facts became inconvenient. The morning itself felt strangely cold despite the weather. Quiet hallways. Muted conversations. Lawyers walking around carrying lives inside folders thick enough to break marriages all over again. And beside me, Alina, calm as ever. No dramatics. No visible anxiety. No squeezing my hand every 10 seconds asking if I was okay. She simply stood beside me like she belonged there. Grounded, elegant, untouchably composed. At one point, while we waited outside the courtroom, I looked over at her and asked quietly, "You really aren't worried?" She looked up from her phone. "About what?" "The case." She blinked once, genuinely confused. "Marcus," she said softly, "Cassandra is about to legally dissect that woman in public. Why would I be worried?" I actually laughed for the first time that morning. Because somehow Elena had reached a point where she trusted the situation more than I did. Not blindly. Not emotionally. She simply understood the full scope now. She knew Cassandra wasn't just competent. She was surgical. And apparently that knowledge erased fear entirely. Then Sabrina arrived. And honestly, if emotional manipulation were an Olympic event, she would have qualified nationally. She stepped into that courthouse dressed like the grieving widow of a tragedy she personally authored. Soft makeup, muted colors, minimal jewelry, carefully manufactured sadness arranged across her face with almost artistic precision. Even her body language looked rehearsed. Slower steps, lowered gaze, controlled fragility. The image of a woman betrayed. And for a split second, I almost admired the commitment to performance. Almost. Then I remembered the fake accounts. The threats. The affair, the lawsuits, the manipulation. And suddenly the act just looked exhausting. Richard arrived separately. That alone said enough. No united front. No confident power couple energy. No synchronized image management. Just tension. Visible tension. He looked terrible. Not physically destroyed yet, but strained in the way people look when they know multiple disasters are approaching from different directions simultaneously. Because while Sabrina was busy fighting me publicly, Richard was quietly realizing the forensic investigation inside my father's company was becoming very real. And judging by the way he kept checking his phone every few minutes, he already knew enough to be afraid. Then court began. Sabrina's attorney spoke first. And to his credit, he tried. He really tried. He painted Sabrina as a loyal wife, emotionally blindsided by a deceptive husband who had concealed massive wealth structures throughout the marriage. A woman deprived of financial transparency. A woman manipulated into an unequal relationship. A woman now simply seeking fairness. It was a good performance. If you ignored facts. Then Cassandra stood up, and the entire atmosphere changed. Some people argue. Some people persuade. Cassandra dissected. Calmly, politely, methodically. No theatrics. No emotional grandstanding. Just precision. She started with the timeline, and immediately the foundation of Sabrina's argument began collapsing. Asset transfers completed before marriage. Legally documented. Corporate structuring predating the relationship itself. Tax records. Filing histories. Witness verification. Everything timestamped so thoroughly it felt less like defense and more like historical reconstruction. Then came the financial behavior. Visible marital accounts. Spending records. Luxury purchases. Designer transactions. Vacations. Jewelry. Withdrawals. Patterns showing Sabrina had not only benefited substantially during the marriage, but had burned through accessible funds at astonishing speed. Cassandra never raised her voice once, which somehow made it worse, because every sentence landed cleanly, clinically. Then came the affair timeline. And that changed the room. Messages, location overlaps, travel records, communication patterns. Proof that Richard and Sabrina's relationship began while we were still legally married. Not emotionally separated. Not complicated. Married. The atmosphere shifted immediately. Even Sabrina's lawyer realized momentum was slipping. Then Cassandra delivered the final blow. The text. I still remember the silence before they appeared on the screen. Because some part of Sabrina clearly believed those messages would never leave private conversations. And maybe they wouldn't have, if she hadn't decided to drag everyone back into court. The first few messages already looked bad. Mocking me. Mocking the marriage. Mocking my personality. Then came the one that detonated the entire courtroom. Temporary stability until I find a real upgrade. The sentence hung in the air like something toxic. No context could save it. No explanation could soften it. Even the judge looked visibly disgusted. And for the first time all day, Sabrina's composure cracked. Not slightly. Completely. You could actually see the moment reality entered the room and collided with the version of herself she had been performing. Because until then, she had still been operating inside narrative. Inside emotional framing. Inside selective memory. But evidence has a cruel way of stripping stories down to skeletons. And suddenly she wasn't a misunderstood victim anymore. She was a woman who had openly treated marriage like an investment strategy that underperformed. Her lawyer attempted recovery, tried reframing, tried contextualizing the messages, tried arguing emotional frustration. It failed spectacularly, because the problem wasn't just infidelity anymore. It was motive, entitlement, calculation. The judge eventually leaned back, removed his glasses briefly, and delivered the kind of disappointment that sounded far more devastating than anger. He made the ruling painfully clear. Marriage is not a lottery ticket. Emotional dissatisfaction does not create retroactive ownership rights. Sabrina was not entitled to assets that legally existed outside the marital estate, especially not after the divorce had already been finalized, and certainly not through arguments built more on resentment than law. Case dismissed. Completely. Then came the part nobody expected. The judge ordered Sabrina to cover a substantial portion of the legal fees. And that shattered whatever remained of her illusion. Because lawsuits feel glamorous right up until consequences become invoices. She looked stunned. Actually stunned. Like she genuinely believed reality would bend itself around the intensity of her feelings. Beside me, Alina stayed perfectly calm. No smirk. No celebration. No vindictive satisfaction. She simply reached over and adjusted my tie slightly before whispering, "It's over now." And somehow, that affected me more than the ruling itself. Because she wasn't celebrating Sabrina's collapse. She was relieved my piece had survived it. Meanwhile, across the courtroom, Richard looked like a man realizing his problems had only just begun. Because unlike Sabrina, his disaster wasn't dismissed today. His was still building. Quietly, structurally. And somewhere in the middle of all that silence, Cassandra began organizing her files with the relaxed energy of someone who had just professionally executed a public demolition exactly as planned. "I almost feel bad for her," I admitted quietly while standing to leave. Cassandra glanced up briefly. "No, you don't," she said. And honestly, she was right. Almost wasn't even close. Outside the courthouse, Sabrina made one final attempt to regain control. Or maybe that wasn't what it really was. Maybe it was panic. Maybe it was the horrifying realization that after months of narratives, manipulation, threats, lawsuits, fake accounts, emotional warfare, and public performances, reality had still chosen against her. Whatever it was, it exploded the moment we stepped into the parking lot. The courthouse doors shut behind us with heavy finality, and for a brief second, the world almost felt quiet again. Cassandra had already split off toward another call, looking almost energized after professionally dismantling Sabrina in court. Reporters lingered near the entrance, hoping for one last dramatic quote. Lawyers moved toward expensive cars while pretending not to observe the tension radiating across the parking area. And beside me, Alina, calm as ever. One hand looped lightly around my arm. Grounded, elegant, dangerously peaceful. That woman had a terrifying ability to remain emotionally still while the world around her collapsed into noise. And maybe that was exactly why Sabrina couldn't stand her. Because Alina represented everything Sabrina could never imitate convincingly. Not beauties, not elegance, peace, real peace. The kind that doesn't require performance. We were halfway toward the car when Sabrina intercepted us. "You planned this," she snapped, fury shaking beneath her voice. "You made me look stupid." I stopped walking slowly. Honestly, months ago, that accusation would have angered me. Now, it just sounded exhausting. I turned toward her and stared quietly for a long moment. And suddenly memories hit me all at once. Years of explaining away her behavior. Years of minimizing disrespect. Years of protecting her image while she quietly destroyed mine behind closed doors. Years of being emotionally managed without fully realizing it. And then another image surfaced in my head unexpectedly. Alina, 6 years earlier. The codes and soil event. The soft, nervous smile she wore while trying to act more confident than she actually felt. The way she looked at me that night like I was someone extraordinary. How her body had reacted to her first ever intercourse so much she squirted uncontrollably, and the adorable panic afterwards. The way she had looked at me flustered, overwhelmed, trying unsuccessfully to hide how deeply that night had affected her. Then Seth and I making light of the situation. Then the nickname, Orgasm Lily. Even now that memory made something twist violently inside my chest. Because while Sabrina had spent years weaponizing love, Alina had spent years surviving it. And somehow she still stood beside me now with gentleness instead of bitterness. I looked back at Sabrina. "No," I said quietly. "You did that yourself." I paused. "I just stopped protecting you from the consequences." The words landed hard. Harder than shouting ever could have. Because deep down, she knew they were true. For years, I had softened impact for her. Absorbed damage quietly. Protected her from outcomes she earned herself. And the moment I stopped doing that, reality reached her at full speed. Her expression cracked instantly. Not sadness, rage, humiliation, panic. The kind that comes when someone realizes the version of the world they depended on no longer exists. Then she pointed at me with a trembling hand. "I swear on my life I will make you suffer." Her voice broke halfway through the sentence. "Retribution is coming for you, Marcus." Then her eyes snapped toward Alina. "And for this bitch too." Honestly, at that point I felt sorry for her. Not mockingly, genuinely. Because healthy people don't unravel like that in public. Healthy people don't destroy themselves trying to remain relevant in someone else's life. And through all of it, Alina remained unbelievably calm. No fear, no visible anger, no insecurity. She simply looked at Sabrina quietly. And maybe that calmness hurt Sabrina more than anything else possibly could have. Because Alina wasn't competing with her. She had already won without trying. Meanwhile, Richard stood beside his car several feet away. And somehow that image said more about their marriage than any argument ever could. He wasn't trying to stop Sabrina. Wasn't pulling her away. Wasn't calming her down. Wasn't shielding her from public humiliation. Nothing. He just stood there waiting for the performance to end so they could disappear from public view. That was it. No partnership. No protection. Just exhaustion. Two people tied together by the wreckage they created. Then Elena spoke. Quietly. "You've been at war your entire life, Sabrina. Please get help." And something about the way she said it was absolutely devastating. There was no superiority in her voice. No mockery. No victory. Just genuine concern. A soft sadness that sounded almost compassionate, which somehow humiliated Sabrina far more than anger ever could have. Because the moment those words landed, she completely unraveled. Not emotionally shaken. Destroyed. Her voice started fluctuating wildly. Loud 1 second. Barely audible the next. Then suddenly screaming again. Words collapsing into each other until half her sentences stopped making sense. Threats mixing with sobs. Breathing uneven. Mascara streaking down her face as tears finally broke through whatever control she had left. And honestly, it was the first time I had ever seen Sabrina lose herself that completely. This woman built her entire identity around composure. control, image, precision. Even her emotions used to feel calculated. But standing there in that courthouse driveway, she looked like someone internally collapsing in real time. People openly stared now. Phones slowly appeared. Reporters subtly redirected cameras toward the scene. Whispers spread through the parking lot like ripples. And there she was. The same woman who once obsessed over appearances more than anything else. Breaking apart publicly in the middle of the courthouse entrance. At one point, her legs gave out completely. She dropped to her knees, crying, not elegantly, not theatrically, bitterly. The kind of crying that sounds less like sadness and more like something inside a person finally tearing beyond repair. And through all of it, Richard still barely moved. Honestly, that was the saddest part. Not the threats, not the screaming, not the humiliation, the emptiness. The fact that the man she detonated her entire life for couldn't even bring himself to walk over and hold her together publicly. Alina squeezed my hand lightly when she noticed the media vultures closing in. "Come on," she whispered. So we left. No final speeches. No triumphant exit. Just silence. As we got into the car, I looked back once through the window. Sabrina was still kneeling there weeping, while courthouse security awkwardly pretended not to notice her. And for the first time in years, I felt absolutely nothing. No anger. No heartbreak. No desire for revenge. Just distance. Alina started the car quietly. At first, I wasn't paying attention to where we were going. My mind was still untangling itself from years of emotional warfare. But after a few minutes, I noticed the route. I turned toward her slowly. "You're driving to your place." A small smile appeared on her lips. She kept her eyes on the road. That meant something. Since getting married, we mostly lived together at my condo. But every once in a while, we'd disappear to her house for private getaways away from the world. And over time, that routine had developed its own unspoken meaning between us. Because every single time Alina drove me there instead of home, it meant one thing. We were activating Orgasm Lily tonight. God. The irony of that nickname still destroyed me emotionally sometimes. Because what once existed as one of the cruelest moments of my life had somehow transformed into something intimate between us. Not humiliating anymore. Not painful. Reclaimed. Loved. The first time she jokingly used the nickname during our honeymoon, I nearly died from emotional shock. And then she laughed so hard, she snorted wine through her nose. She was a full-blown fountain at that point, which made Seth some kind of profit for upgrading the joke to Fountain of Lilies on our anniversary. Elena just owned it. Now it had become ours. A private joke built on healed wounds instead of shame. Out of nowhere, I slid my hand between her thighs, teasingly letting my hand wander higher, which startled her. "Jesus, Marcus," she smacked my hand. "Stop it." I chuckled as I withdrew my hand. "Pervert," she added under her breath. "Look who's talking," I shot back. "You're practically doing 200 in a 50-zone racing toward your own crucifixion." That broke her instantly. She burst out laughing. "Idiot." I joined in, and for a while we just sat there laughing like two people who had finally survived something ugly together. And honestly, that perfectly described us. The drive itself felt surreal. City lights sliding across the windshield. The silence between us afterward felt warm instead of heavy. My body still carrying courtroom exhaustion, while my mind slowly adjusted to something unfamiliar. Closure. Real closure. Not temporary silence. Not strategic distance. An actual ending. "Your thighs feel warmer than usual," I said while searching for a reaction. She kept her eyes on the road, the The ghost of a smile played at the corner of her lips. I sighed and smiled in understanding, turning my own gaze towards the road. It better be a boy. Elena chuckled like she disagreed completely. At a red light, Elena reached over and intertwined her fingers with mine. "You okay?" she asked softly. I looked at her for a long moment, and suddenly I realized something terrifying. There genuinely were no words strong enough anymore for what I felt toward this woman. About the years Elena silently carried, loving me while watching someone else live the life that should have been hers. And somehow, she still chose tenderness. "I think so," I admitted quietly. She smiled softly. "Good." That smile healed things therapy probably couldn't. When we finally reached her house, she parked, turned off the engine, then leaned back in her seat for a moment. Peace settled around us naturally. No performance. No tension. Just us. Finally free. Then she looked over at me. "We're finally free now, aren't we?" And hearing her say it out loud almost broke me emotionally in ways court never could. Because freedom sounds abstract until you feel the absence of fear inside your own chest. I leaned across the console and kissed her slowly. Not passionately at first. Gratefully. "We are now," I whispered. She smiled immediately. "Good," she murmured. Because I extended our honeymoon reservation. I laughed so hard my forehead dropped against her shoulder. And honestly, that was the exact moment everything finally clicked for me. Winning isn't revenge. Winning isn't watching someone collapse. Winning isn't court rulings or legal fees or public humiliation. Winning is peace. Winning is sleeping without anxiety poisoning your chest at 2 a.m. Winning is building a life with someone who loves you without calculation. Someone who once offered you her entire life savings out of love instead of trying to take yours out of greed. Someone who waited years carrying wounds you accidentally gave her and still chose softness over cruelty when life finally brought you back to her. And the greatest revenge of all. Living so fully, so peacefully, so deeply loved, that the people who tried to ruin you are forced to watch from the outside, realizing they destroyed their own access to happiness with their own hands.
Hey. Yo, wait. Before you leave, subscribe to this channel. And the second channel. And the third channel. And the backup channel in case I lose the password. Hey. Subscribe to the gaming channel, and the vlog channel, and the reaction channel where I react to people reacting to my reactions. Why? Subscribe to the cooking channel, even though I only know how to boil water. Subscribe to the fitness channel, even though I've been starting Monday for the last 3 years back. Subscribe to the travel channel, where I travel from my bedroom to the kitchen and back. Subscribe to the tech channel, where I fix one problem and create 17 new ones. Subscribe to the relationship channel, where I give advice I don't even follow myself. Subscribe to the channel where my girlfriend caught me trying to sell her old slippers on Marketplace. Subscribe to the channel where my mother still comments. Call me immediately. Subscribe to this channel, and that channel, and the gaming channel, and the vlog channel, and the cooking channel, and the travel channel, and the channel where I got locked outside my own house in my pajamas. Subscribe. If you don't subscribe, I'll start a new channel, just to ask you again. This is channel number 1, channel number 2, channel number 3, channel number 4. At this point, even I don't know which channel I'm uploading to. Quiet. Hit subscribe. Ring the bell. And I'll see you on one of the channels.